Hello and welcome to Restoring Our American Republic. I'm Chuck Benoit with the nature of things where we are realigning God, government, and natural law so that we might restore our American Republic. Well, what a State of the Union address. What a president. And what a disaster the Democrat Party showed themselves to be. Now, if you listen to our president, whenever he's talking to anybody, you will hear the message of the success of his policies over and over again. But one thing that he said, and I've heard him say it before, is the idea that what he still wants to do is to rededicate our nation to the God of the Bible on our 250th anniversary here on the 4th of July. Friends, this is probably the most important thing he could do for our nation. With the onset of Islam and the godlessness of the Democrats and Socialists, the rededication of our nation to the one true God is paramount. I would argue that the foundation of our nation's prosperity is the Judeo-Christian worldview. People talk about our resources or our lack of enemies on our border or luck for successes, but not even our freedom is what's responsible for our prosperity. We're the wealthiest nation in the world, and at the same time, we are $37 trillion in debt. So how does that work? Well, it works because we have been cut off from the wealth we have in this world because we've been cut off from worshiping the God of our founding. Those of us on the right know that we are, well, right, but we may be so convinced of that we don't see God's hand in not just our blessings, but the cutting off of access to those blessings because of our national godlessness. Let us not forget to honor and thank our God daily for this nation, and let's be a part of spreading the message of salvation by faith in Him. These are the things that we, as a nation, have been established to do and to be. Thank God for our president, Donald J. Trump, and thank God for your personal life blessings, and also pray that the rededication of our nation to our God is more than perfunctory, that we, the people, will respond appropriately. This is the recipe to keep winning even after President Trump leaves the White House. That said, welcome, Mr. Levine.
Thanks a lot, Chuck. Happy Thursday. I can't believe it's going to be Friday tomorrow and another week is in the record books, Chuck.
Yeah, I always find that it's so weird that every time I turn around, it's either Monday or Friday. It's like the week just flies by.
Exactly. It really does. It really does. But it's great to be here with you today. And I just want to shout out to our good friend Stephanie Winheim. Happy birthday, Stephanie. Today is Stephanie's birthday. So
There you go.
let's
Happy
all be
birthday,
grateful
Stephanie.
for her and her husband Gary and her family and all that stuff because they're doing great work. So happy birthday, Steph.
There you go. Awesome, awesome. Good shout out. Maybe I'll try to get something in um, the comments there.
That'd be great.
So we had there was quite an interesting REC meeting last Monday. It was Monday, right? It's going to be Tuesday now, but it was last.
It was Monday.
It
Yeah,
was
that's
Monday.
correct.
Right.
That's right. REC meeting Monday night, live stream Tuesday morning. We did it in the books.
There you go. Awesome, awesome. And we had some successes, I think, right? We
Major
passed a
successes, I would
resolution.
say. Yep. And while we're at it, let me just throw a little shout out to our good friend Ken McCard too. Ken is a workhorse, and he really insists that our movement stays plugged in, active, and on offense, which our friend Anthony Sabatini has always been a big fan of staying on offense. The best defense is a strong offense. So I just really want to, sometimes, as we advocate for the restoration of our country, the battle is laborious. But don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, that the struggle is what makes the reward worth achieving and which gives us satisfaction in the end. If there's no struggle, there's no gratification in the end. So I just want to thank Ken for all the work he does rallying our troops together for example, it's George Fest this weekend, and Ken is leading that initiative to make sure that we have people in our parade, people manning our booths, stuff like that. So again, there's another fighter, and that's Ken McCard, and we've got a whole team of people on that, and I don't want to discredit anyone because they're all important. But let's talk about what happened at the REC meeting, Chuck.
Yeah, well, just before we get off the Ken McCartan thing, Ken is so faithful and loyal to the REC, and it does not appear that the REC is nearly as loyal to him. I just wanted to make that comment. So yeah, we had a resolution. This resolution was written and proposed back in 2025, and although I don't have that date, I know that it is the first and possibly the only resolution proposed in 2025. And here it is in February, and it was only passed because the efforts of the committee demanded that it be put on the agenda, even though it was left off again. So I just want to make sure people realize that the leadership of the REC here in Lake County isn't necessarily that interested in the will of the people, the determination of the actual executive committee. And they're constantly putting up roadblocks and making it difficult for we the people here in Lake County to make comments and to have our requests and our will made known. So with that, we're talking about Lake County Republican GOP Resolution 2025-01. And it's entitled, "The Lake County Republican GOP endorses the 47th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, and his plan to eliminate vote by mail, mail-in ballots, and voting machines." So that is the resolution, and there are several whereases. We can kind of go over them if you'd like, Mike. The first one being, the citizens of Lake County have lost confidence in American elections, which since the reckless expansion of vote by mail in 2020 have been plagued by fraud, manipulation, and gross management. Have anything to say about that, Mike?
Yes, I do. Gross mismanagement. And I will tell you, Chuck, that I've been in a lot of meeting rooms with a lot of people over the last several years, since 2020, let's just say. The Villages is a classic case study, but you can be in a meeting room with hundreds of people, and you can ask from the podium, how many of you people believe that the 2020 election was stolen? And literally 100% of the hands in the room go up. So for me, I like to do things a little differently, as you might have noticed. So I'd like to ask the other question. Is there anyone in the room who believes that the 2020 election was legitimate? And not a single hand. And I tell people, I preface it, be brave.
Be brave.
We're not going to excoriate you if you believe that the 2020 election was administered fairly and all that. So, be brave, stand up if that's what you believe. We're going to honor you for your courage, if nothing else, right? But no one. So the point is, on plank number one, Lake County Republicans do not believe that that the 2020 election was administered fairly and the result was legitimate. This is the preponderance of Republicans by far in Lake County, Florida, Chuck. So that's what I have to say about that.
Yes, well, yeah, our gubernatorial candidate, Byron Donald, believes that it was fair, and he would have raised his hand for your question. So people
No,
need
he
to be
wouldn't
paying.
have. He wouldn't have. He would have avoided the question by
Well,
not raising his hand and speaking to it at all.
okay, well,
And by the way, let me just say something to you. When we had Seth Keshel at a Lincoln Reagan dinner explaining, demonstrating that the 2020 election was stolen, Daniel Webster and his staff were the only ones who did not raise their hand when we asked, how many of you think the 2020 election was stolen? And when Keith Truenow, our state senator, realized that Seth Keshel was going to talk about the 2020 election, he got up and walked out of the room. So there you go. Elected officials do not want to buy into the idea that our elections are rigged and stolen, even though they know that it's true. And you can take that right to the Secretary of State of the state of Florida, who pressured Republican legislators in the House and the Senate to um, defend Florida's request to remove certain provisions out of HB 991 that you and I have been reporting on over the last couple of weeks, let's just say. So this is a real problem, ladies and gentlemen, and I have a lot more to say about that, but we'll never get through all these planks if I keep on ranting. So I'll let you move us through it, Chuck.
Okay, so the next whereas, and those of you who are listening out there, you might want to think about each of these whereases and find out where you might possibly stand on this. So whereas mail-in ballots have proven to be the single largest source of election corruption, enabling ballot harvesting, broken chain of custody, failed signature verification, and the mass mailing of ballots to unverified addresses, undeliverable addresses, and addresses known to be incorrect. That's our whereas. And Mike, it seems like I remember some videos of our SOE standing in front of racks and racks of return mail regarding these mail-in ballots.
I think there were 18,000 of them, Chuck, in Lake County, Florida. 18,000 returned mail, undeliverable, right?
That's
Now, since then,
Lake
because of the
County,
work
right?
of the Florida legislature, some of that has been cleaned up. But 991, House Bill 991, makes it even worse because people who go to the Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles and want to register to vote or update their voter record are required to produce proof of citizenship. Well, under 991 will be required to produce proof of citizenship. And if they do not produce proof of citizenship, that record will be electronically transferred over to the supervisor. Oh, well, first to the Secretary of State and then to the local supervisor of elections. Okay. And that voter will be registered as unverified, which takes all those voter records that we scrubbed off of our voter rolls and adds back a tranche probably much larger than what we removed, giving access to additional vote by mail fraud, Chuck. And I just want to add in that, when you start looking at the 2024 primary turnout numbers, I think in Lake County were around 24% turnout. And I'm saying to you that the turnout was not 24%. I believe that there were mail-in ballots counted that were not legitimately cast, Chuck.
And that is obviously the concern that we have and the reason why one of the reasons why we passed this resolution.
Oh, and
So
by the way, our state rep in House District 26 won the mail-in vote handily, and her numbers declined through early voting and election day numbers. So somebody might raise an eyebrow over that, Chuck.
yeah, someone might. And I know I would. So our next whereas in our resolution 2025-01 is whereas the spread of computerized voting machines, even in areas where they are unnecessary, has only increased public distrust in elections. And I will have to say that it certainly has increased my distrust. I don't trust these voting machines at all. As a um, let's see, I was one of those watchers there. What do they call us when we're
Poll
watching?
watcher.
Polar watcher, right there we go. And at the end of the day, to watch them box those things up, And it just, I don't know, just makes you feel real uncomfortable.
Let me tell you something, Chuck. Our own CIA was involved with Smartmatic in Venezuela, yet we're using Smartmatic. Maybe I should be careful. Maybe I should be careful. Okay. Because again, anyway. So let's just say that we know that government agencies from around the world have been rigging elections in foreign countries for a long time. Yet we still agree to allow the utilization of the same software platforms that were used to rig elections in other countries to be used in our country. And that is stupid. If you're interested in free and fair elections. So again, we are fighting a monumental adversary, which is our government bureaucracies. And I would say on election integrity, our Secretary of State is the root of the problem because he, as a member of the National Association of Secretaries of State, colludes with other secretaries of state, regardless of party affiliation, and brings back the junk that he gets from there and applies it here in the state of Florida. Um, and I'll leave it at that, Chuck.
Well, there you go. Yeah, it is kind of odd that so many Republican SOEs and secretaries of state kind of interact with the opposite side, whom we have determined is it isn't the idea that we have different uh, ideas on how to get things done. What we really have are different perspectives of what the United States ought to be, and you know what the fundamental intent and purpose of who we are is. So yeah, that bothers me completely. Um,
And Donald Trump said it very nicely in the State of the Union, right? If you believe that the purpose of the American government is to support the citizens of the United States over non-citizens, stand up.
yeah,
And I'll tell you right now, the legislators in Congress are, you know, congressional delegations really demonstrated who is who. So anyone who didn't stand up when President Trump asked, what is the purpose of the American government to support citizens or non-citizens? That is a litmus test for who needs to be removed from Congress, Chuck Benoit.
yeah, and that appears to be virtually every Democrat in the hall. You know, maybe one or
Every
two.
Democrat in the hall, every Democrat in the hall. And when you take an astronaut like Mark Kelly from Arizona, and this guy can't agree that the purpose of the American government is support American citizens, he sits there perplexed. That is just crazy. And then, of course, you know, the minority leader in the House, we don't have to go through Hakeem Jeffries and all that, you know what I mean? But, and then, you know, Debbie Wasserman Schultz right here from Palm Beach, Florida. Honestly, the corruption stinks to high heaven. And this is the root of it, Chuck. When they can't stand up and say that the purpose of the American government is to support the well-being of citizens of this country, they, in my view, are traitors. I know that traitor is has a very specific term, and I think if you drill down into it, and I think if everything that was that has occurred was brought out into the sunlight, I believe that treason would be um, approvable.
Well, we'll leave that at that. And just reminding our viewers that we're going through a resolution here, and we're hoping that you might even consider each of these whereases, where you might stand on them. The next one is whereas
Whereas
voting machines controlled by a handful of private corporations create a dangerous black box system vulnerable to hacking, tampering, and misprogramming, removing transparency and citizen oversight from the vote counting process. So what we're dealing with here is, again, who's counting the votes? We the people, or some machine that's being uh, governed by or run by um, somebody who owns the machine. That just seems a
Chuck,
little
if you
odd.
can turn up your mic a little bit easily, that would be helpful. But yeah, we
Okay,
just
so
talked about it. We just talked about it.
yeah,
So there's nothing more to say on that issue, I don't believe. I think we can move on to the next plank.
okay. Um, Whereas only hand-marked, hand-counted ballots paper ballots provide a transparent, verifiable, and constitutional method of conducting elections. Hand-marked, hand-counted paper ballots.
I totally agree. And I think it's been clearly demonstrated that that is a practical solution. And if you recall, Chuck, on Monday night, there was a gentleman at the Republican Executive Committee meeting who introduced himself as a poll worker, somebody who's on the payroll for the supervisor of elections and works in the polling stations in the precincts. And he opened the debate about the passage of this resolution with the idea that hand counting is not practical and not doable. And then we found out that he wasn't even a member. So he came as, and this guy has been here in many of our REC meetings and always speaks on behalf of the Supervisor of Elections Office, telling us that our concerns are illegitimate and that hand counting and all the things that we want is not doable. And of course, our good friend Diane Vanetta stood up and explained very clearly that he was totally wrong and that it's been demonstrated time after time that hand counting is doable. So we want to have a nice shout out to Diane, who very successfully articulated our point of view at the meeting, Chuck.
There you go. So our next whereas is whereas the United States Constitution vests the authority for administrating elections squarely with the states, and it is the duty of the state to secure those elections against fraud and corruption. So this whereas is pointing to the fact that it is the state's responsibility to secure our elections, and so has every
But Chuck, I think a day or two ago, you and I actually took out our little pocket Constitution guide and looked that up. And I think that the Constitution of the United States does give the federal government jurisdiction over federal elections. Is that true or not?
I think we did talk about that, and so I don't think that is exactly what this whereas is directing. It's directing, I think, the idea that the states do have a responsibility to provide us secure and fair elections, whether or not the federal government has a responsibility also.
I agree.
Okay, there you go.
Exactly.
So
So the point is, and this just in closing on this particular issue, Chuck, the point is that the states, because the federal government has a right to impose certain rules over federal elections, the states typically apply those rules in state elections also for practical reasons. Rather than having two elections, one run by federal standards and another run by state standards, the states typically just adopt and apply the federal mandated procedures to state elections, Chuck.
yeah, I do agree that that's oftentimes the case, but not necessarily always the case. um, but anyway, the okay, the those that's the end of our whereases, and now we have a couple of therefores. Therefore, be it resolved that the Lake County Republican GOP fully endorses President Donald J. Trump's plan to eliminate mail-in ballots and voting machines. That's our first be it resolved. The question we're asking our viewers is, Do you agree with that? Do you agree that we should be eliminating mail-in and ballots and voting machines from our elections and putting the responsibility of hand counting votes back to the citizen, to each and every county and precinct citizen?
And just keeping in mind that mail-in ballots, no one is recommending that we eliminate mail-in ballots altogether, obviously for military who are stationed overseas and health hardships. And even I think President Trump said in the speech uh, that people traveling would have an exemption. You can apply for a mail-in ballot, but the terms under which you can receive a mail-in ballot are much restricted. And the Save America Act, by the way, Chuck, addresses this in detail as well.
Right, that would be, be it further resolved that the Lake County Republican GOP will actively encourage and support legislation in the state of Florida to abolish vote by mail ballots with the exception of, with exception for military, medically approved emergency workers and such as EMTs, police, fire, sheriff, deputies, etc. Mandate the exclusive use of watermark paper ballots counted by hand under the watchful eye of the citizens of the state as a verification of the tabulation machines. And we do want to comment on that before I get the final resolve, be it resolved. Um,
I'm good here, Chuck. Thanks a lot. Let's move on.
You're good, okay. And so finally, be it resolved that this resolution stands as the official and unwavering position of the Lake County Republican GOP. Election integrity will never be restored until Florida returns to paper ballots, hand counted in the open, free from machines, vendors, and fraudulent mail-in schemes. So that is our resolution passed um, this past Monday night.
Well, you got to keep in mind, Chuck, that the whole issue associated with the 2020 election in Georgia is a hot like a firecracker issue right now. So there is going to be more and more um, action taken on elections here in the next couple of weeks in Georgia, and that is going to open the door to more investigations in other states as well. And so it's everybody just keep your eye on the ball here, because as soon as we start getting some victories, particularly out of Georgia, then it'll really embolden our election reform efforts here in the state of Florida, Chuck. It's going to be big. And when that happens, we can boldly go to this capital, which we already do. And of course, not enough of us go. And, I don't go all the time myself, so I'm not, criticizing anyone who doesn't go. I mean, obviously I get it, but it is important, that we do it. But particularly after we get there's going to be some findings that are not going to be good for the governor of Georgia, Kemp, or the Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, or the Fulton County Supervisor of Elections, and all that kind of stuff. There's going to be some bad news coming to those people, Fannie Willis and those people, and it's going to be really bad for them. And when that ruling comes down, then it will give us legitimacy and to be outraged about what's going on in Florida, Chuck.
Yeah, that is probably the tip of the spear here in regard to the 2020 election fraud and where we might be heading and all that. We are pretty much
It
out
was
of
reported
time.
this morning. It was reported this morning that a judge who was heading into evidentiary hearings in Georgia on their 2020 election kicked it out, canceled the hearings, and required the parties to go to mediation, Chuck. And the reason that the state wants to go to mediation is because they know they're going to lose in evidentiary hearings in court, Chuck. That is massive.
Look, we are pretty much out of time, but all of a sudden I got a big quick question in our comment section. Um, And the question from Dixie Fectel, I don't know if
Dixie Fechtel.
Dixie,
Oh, very nice. Thank you.
okay.
Thanks for watching, Dixie.
And so she asked, what do you think about the extent of early voting as opposed to vote by mail? I mean, well, what's your opinion first, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I think it should. I mean, honestly and truly, I would like to have, declare Election Day a holiday and have 1 day voting, right? So that's where we are, and that's my personal preference, and that's what I'd like to see happen. Whether that's achievable or not, I think it is. As soon as we start, like you can hear in my voice, right? We're compromising already, and we shouldn't be doing that. Again, as I tell you, Chuck, from time to time that we have to go boldly and we have to be, as we said earlier in this broadcast, so we have to stay on offense. And that does not mean cowering to our opponents who don't like us talking about single 1 day voting on election day, but we need to demand it. I mean, that's just the way it is. So yeah, I agree with Dixie that we should have 1 day voting. And if you have to make it a national holiday, do it. Do it. Let's make a big deal about it, right?
Shut it all down, right?
Shut it
Well,
down.
there we go.
Paper
So,
ballots, hand counted in the precincts, 1 day of voting with mail in ballots only in very specific cases and under hardships.
there you go.
I think
Well,
Dixie and I are together on that. Give me a thumbs
a-
up, Dixie, if you agree.
as is my custom, Mike, final comments.
Ladies and gentlemen, our country has been operating under fictitious pretenses for a very long time. And elections are the backbone. As our great president pointed out in the State of the Union speech, it's probably the most important right that we have is the right to one man, one vote, free and fair elections. And that is not happening in the United States of America. And we need to drive this home, certainly in the state of Florida. And it's amazing that our Republican legislature, our Republican governor, and our Republican cabinet will not support us in this. And that question, why, needs to be answered. It needs to be answered unequivocally. And we need to see the physical ballots that were voted in every election. As Diane Vanetta pointed out at our REC meeting on Monday night, that, if you want to use a tabulator to count the votes, then they should be hand counted in the precincts as the counter verification to tabulators. And that's all there is to that, Chuck.
Well, thank you, Mr. Levine, and thank you all for tuning into our twice weekly live stream. Please follow us on Facebook at Restoring Our American Republic. Check us out on YouTube at Restoring Our American Republic ROAR. Please like and share the program. Remember, if you are unwilling to govern yourself, you will be governed by tyrants. Until next time, God bless you, God bless President Donald J. Trump, and God bless America.